They called her the Ice Queen, and she wore that name like armor. Victoria Hayes had never lost a deal, never missed a deadline, never let anyone see her flustered. Her penthouse sat on the 40th floor of the city's most prestigious building. Glass walls, marble floors, and a silence so complete you could hear your own heartbeat echoing back at you. Every morning at 5, the espresso machine hissed in the dark, the only sound in a home that had everything except warmth. She thought she had mastered life, reduced it to quarterly reports and calculated risks, until the day she made a bet, a game with her business rival that she believed she couldn't lose. The contract was simple: 60 days living as a business wife to her biggest competitor, a single father who ran his company from a suburban house that smelled like pancakes and had crayon drawings on the fridge. But the loss forced her to leave the penthouse and step into his home with her designer luggage and her armor intact, ready to prove that family was just another system to optimize. But on the first morning, when a 7-year-old girl asked her, "Do you know how to braid hair?" and she realized she didn't even know how to answer a child's question, that's when the ice began to crack. The conference room had been silent for 3 seconds too long. Victoria Hayes stood at the head of the table, her red Louboutins planted firmly on polished mahogany, watching the faces of 12 board members as they processed what she'd just said. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glittered in the late afternoon sun, a kingdom she'd spent 15 years building, brick by brutal brick. Her presentation had been flawless. 23 slides, each one a surgical strike against the competition. The Henderson Group contract was worth $50 million, and she'd just laid out exactly why it belonged to her company, not his. Marcus Reid sat at the far end of the table, and he was smiling. That was her first mistake, thinking his calm was weakness. He wore a navy sweater instead of a suit, his dark hair slightly too long, and there was a coffee stain on his notebook that he didn't seem to notice or care about. Everything about him screamed amateur hour, which was why Victoria had been so confident. His company, Reid Technologies, had grown fast in the last 3 years, but it was still small, still scrappy, still running out of a converted house in the suburbs instead of a proper downtown office. She'd done her research. Single father, 7-year-old daughter, company built around flexible schedules and work-from-home policies. It was cute. It was also not how you ran a serious business. "Ms. Hayes," he said, his voice cutting through the silence with surprising steadiness. "Your numbers are impressive. Your strategy is sound. But you're missing something." He stood up, and Victoria felt a flicker of irritation. The presentation was over. She'd won. The board just needed to confirm it. "You're trying to solve Henderson's logistics problem with efficiency. I'm offering them humanity. They don't want faster supply chains. They want their employees to stop quitting because they're burned out and exhausted." Victoria's jaw tightened. "Business isn't about feelings, Mr. Reid. It's about results." "Funny," he said, tilting his head slightly. "I thought results included employee retention, customer loyalty, and sustainable growth. But maybe that's just me running my company like a family instead of a machine." The barb landed, and she felt it. Around the table, several board members shifted in their seats. One of them, Jenkins, the CFO, was nodding slightly. Victoria's fingers curled around her laser pointer. "Are you suggesting that caring about profit margins makes me cold?" "I'm suggesting," Marcus said evenly, "that maybe you've optimized everything in your life except the part that actually matters." He paused, and the smile returned. But this time it had an edge. "Tell you what, let's make this interesting. The board votes in 3 days. Whoever wins the Henderson contract wins. But the loser has to prove they can do it the other person's way." Victoria's pulse quickened. This was a trap, but she couldn't see the shape of it yet. "What exactly are you proposing?" "If I win, you spend 60 days working for me. Not as a consultant, not as an advisor. As a full participant in my company and my life. You live in my house. You help run my household. You see how a business can function without sacrificing everything human about it. He leaned forward, hands flat on the table. And if you win, I'll sell you my company for whatever price you name. I'll step aside, let you absorb my team, my clients, everything. The room went deadly quiet. Victoria's mind raced through the angles. It was absurd. It was unprofessional. It was also the kind of bold move that would make headlines, and she could already see how she'd spin it. The Ice Queen so confident in her methods that she'd accept any challenge. And there was no way she'd lose. Her presentation had been airtight. His was just emotional storytelling wrapped in buzzwords about wellness and culture. "You have yourself a deal, Mr. Reid," she said, extending her hand across the table. His palm was warm when they shook, and his grip was firmer than she'd expected. "I'll start packing for your guest room. You should start packing up your office." 3 days later, the board voted. Marcus Reid won by a single vote. Victoria stared at the email for a full minute before her assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Hayes, your car is here." She didn't answer. The words on the screen didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. She'd triple-checked every number, rehearsed every argument, anticipated every objection. And still, Henderson had chosen him. They'd chosen the man who talked about giving employees half-day Fridays and mental health resources over the woman who'd promised them a 15% cost reduction in the first quarter. Her lawyer had already confirmed it. The bet was legally binding. She'd signed the contract herself, so confident it was just theater. 60 days, starting tomorrow. She had to report to his house at 6 in the morning, and for the next 2 months, she would be, what had he called it, a full participant in his life. The phrase made her skin crawl. She didn't participate. She led. She controlled. She executed. That night, Victoria stood in her penthouse and looked at the 3 suitcases she'd packed. Her assistant had stared at her like she'd lost her mind when she'd explained what to pack. Jeans, sneakers, casual shirts, things she hadn't worn since college, things that didn't have designer labels or require dry cleaning. The apartment felt cavernous around her, the silence pressing against her eardrums like deep water. She walked to her desk and opened the bottom drawer, pulling out the single photograph she kept hidden there. It showed a family of 4, mother, father, 2 daughters, standing in front of a lake house, everyone smiling. She was maybe 9 years old in the picture, her sister 11. It had been taken 3 months before her father stopped coming home for dinner, 6 months before the divorce, a year before her mother explained that some people just loved their work more than they loved people. Victoria slid the photo back into the drawer and closed it firmly. That wasn't her. She'd chosen this life deliberately, built it with intention. She didn't need warmth when she had success. She didn't need family when she had empire. And in 60 days, she'd prove it to Marcus Reid and to herself. The house was nothing like she'd expected. Victoria had pictured something small, maybe cramped, definitely chaotic. Instead, Marcus's home sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees, a 2-story colonial with blue shutters and a front porch that wrapped around the side. Through the windows, she could see warm light and colors, actual colors, not the monochrome grays and whites of her penthouse. There were toys scattered across the front lawn, a bike with training wheels lying on its side, and a basketball hoop over the garage door. It looked like a stock photo of suburban America, and Victoria felt her stomach twist with something she refused to name. She knocked at 6:07, exactly 7 minutes late, because she'd had to circle the block twice to find parking. The door opened immediately, and Marcus stood there in joggers and a t-shirt, holding a spatula. Behind him, she could hear music playing, something acoustic and folky that she didn't recognize. "You're late," he said, but he was smiling. Lily's been watching the door since 6:15. She's very excited to meet you. 6:15? Victoria frowned. I was supposed to be here at 6. And Lily wakes up at 5:30, Marcus said, stepping aside to let her in. Welcome to parenting. Everything starts earlier than you planned for. The house smelled like butter and sugar and something else, something warm that reminded Victoria of childhood in a way that made her deeply uncomfortable. The entryway opened into a living room that was smaller than her walk-in closet, but felt somehow bigger, filled with mismatched furniture and bookshelves and a coffee table covered in colored pencils. On the wall above the couch, there was a gallery of photographs, Marcus and a little girl at various ages, at beaches and parks and birthday parties. In the older photos, there was a woman too, blonde and laughing, and Victoria realized with a jolt that she wasn't in any of the recent ones. Daddy, is that her? A small voice came from the kitchen, and then the little girl appeared. Wearing pajamas covered in cartoon cats and holding a stuffed rabbit. She had Marcus's dark hair and eyes that were too serious for someone so small. Are you really going to live with us for 2 whole months? Victoria opened her mouth and found she didn't know what to say. She spoke to board members, to investors, to CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. She did not speak to children. Yes, that's the arrangement. Cool, the girl said, and then she walked right up to Victoria and hugged her legs. I'm Lily. Daddy says you're going to help him with work stuff. Can you braid hair? Miss Peterson at school does French braids, and I really want to learn, but Daddy only knows ponytails. Victoria stood frozen, the child's arms wrapped around her knees, and looked helplessly at Marcus. He was leaning against the doorframe, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I've never... She cleared her throat. No, I don't know how to braid hair. That's okay, Lily said, releasing her and skipping back toward the kitchen. Daddy didn't know how to make pancakes when Mommy went to heaven, but he learned. You can learn too. Come on, breakfast is almost ready. Victoria followed them into the kitchen, her designer luggage suddenly feeling ridiculous in this space that smelled like maple syrup and normal life. Marcus was flipping pancakes on an electric griddle, and Lily was setting the table with the focused concentration of someone performing a sacred ritual. There were 3 plates, 3 sets of silverware, 3 glasses of orange juice already poured. Everything was ready for her, as if she'd always been part of this morning routine. As if she belonged here. The realization made something in her chest constrict painfully. So here's how it works, Marcus said, sliding pancakes onto plates with practiced efficiency. Mornings are busy. Lily needs to be at school by 8:15, which means we leave at 7:50. Before that, she needs breakfast, teeth brushed, backpack checked, and she has to pick out her clothes the night before, or we lose 20 minutes to indecision. While she's eating, I'm usually doing email triage and prepping for my first meeting. You'll handle breakfast and morning routine. I'll brief you on work stuff during the drive to school. Victoria stared at him. You want me to get a 7-year-old ready for school? I want you to understand how a business runs when it's built around real life instead of the other way around, Marcus said calmly. This is the deal. Full participation. That means mornings, afternoons, evenings. Dinner is at 6. Bedtime routine starts at 7:30. And after Lily's asleep, we work. My team does video calls at 9 because that's when everyone's kids are down. You'll join those. You'll see how we make decisions, how we structure projects, how we build a company culture that doesn't require anyone to sacrifice their humanity. This is insane, Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction. She was already calculating, already trying to figure out how to optimize this chaos, how to turn it into something manageable and controlled. This is life, Marcus corrected gently. Sit down. Eat. You're going to need your energy. The first week was a disaster. Victoria burned 3 breakfasts, forgot to pack Lily's lunch twice, and showed up to school pickup 30 minutes late because she'd lost track of time during a work call. She tried to run Marcus's company the way she ran her own, with schedules and metrics and clearly defined deliverables, and his team responded with polite confusion and gentle resistance. They had a meeting format called Circle Time, where everyone shared wins and struggles and asked for help, and Victoria sat through it, feeling like she'd wandered into a therapy session instead of a business discussion. When she suggested cutting it to save time, 3 people explained that it was the most valuable hour of their week, the thing that kept them connected and functional. At night, after Lily was asleep, Victoria would sit in the guest room and stare at her laptop, trying to manage her own company remotely while processing everything that had happened during the day. Her COO kept sending increasingly frantic emails about decisions that needed her input, about clients who wanted FaceTime, about deals that were stalling without her direct involvement. And she couldn't help them because she was here, in this house, learning how to read picture books with appropriate character voices and how to tell the difference between a meltdown and genuine distress. The breaking point came on day 9. Victoria had finally managed to make pancakes that didn't stick to the pan, had gotten Lily to school on time, and was feeling something dangerously close to confidence when Marcus's mother called. She was supposed to pick Lily up from school that day because Marcus had an investor meeting, but she'd fallen and sprained her ankle. Marcus was 40 minutes outside the city. School ended in 20 minutes. Victoria was the only option. She made it to the school with 3 minutes to spare, her heart hammering in a way it never did during board presentations. The pickup line was chaos, minivans and SUVs and harried parents shouting to each other across car windows. Victoria's sleek black sedan looked absurd among them, and she felt even more absurd standing there in jeans and a sweater, holding the laminated pickup card Marcus had shoved into her hands that morning. When Lily emerged from the building, she was crying, her face blotchy and red, and Victoria's stomach dropped. What happened? Victoria crouched down, and the gesture felt foreign, like she was playing a role in a movie about someone else's life. Are you hurt? Madison said my drawing was ugly, Lily sobbed, and Victoria had no idea who Madison was or why a drawing mattered so much, but the child in front of her was genuinely devastated. For a moment, Victoria's instinct was to solve it, to call the teacher, to address the issue with efficiency and resolution. Then she looked at Lily's face and realized that wasn't what was needed here. Can I see the drawing? Victoria asked quietly. Lily pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her backpack. It showed 3 stick figures labeled Daddy, Lily, and Victoria in wobbly letters, all holding hands in front of a blue house. The figures were disproportionate, the colors outside the lines, and it was objectively terrible by any artistic standard. It was also the first time Victoria could remember anyone putting her in their picture of family. Something cracked in her chest, painful and sudden. I think it's beautiful, Victoria said, and she meant it. Madison doesn't know what she's talking about. This is going on the fridge when we get home. Lily's crying slowed to hiccups. Really? Really, Victoria said firmly. Now get in the car. We're stopping for ice cream, and you're going to tell me everything Madison said so we can figure out what to do about it. That night, after Lily was asleep with the drawing carefully hung on her bedroom wall, Marcus found Victoria sitting in the kitchen with her laptop closed. I heard about Madison, he said, pouring 2 glasses of wine without asking if she wanted one. Lily said you were really nice. She also said you told her that sometimes people say mean things because they're struggling with something hard, and that made her feel better. I have no idea where that came from, Victoria admitted, accepting the glass. I've never dealt with a crying child before. I was making it up as I went. You did great, Marcus said, sitting across from her, and that's kind of the point. You can't optimize parenting. You can't make it efficient. You just have to show up and figure it out and care more about the person than the process." He paused, studying her face. "You're starting to get it." "I don't know what I'm getting," Victoria said. But it was a lie. She was starting to understand that everything she'd built, her company, her reputation, her perfectly controlled life, was missing something essential. She was starting to see that Marcus's business worked not despite his approach, but because of it. His team was loyal because they felt valued. His clients stayed because they trusted him. His daughter was thriving because she came first, always, even when it was inconvenient. And Victoria was starting to realize that she'd spent 15 years running from exactly this kind of connection, terrified that needing people would make her weak. Week 3 began with Lily getting sick. It started as a cough, then became a fever that spiked to 103 degrees at midnight. Marcus was in Boston for a pitch that he couldn't reschedule, and Victoria found herself alone in Lily's bedroom at 2 in the morning, pressing a cold cloth to the child's forehead while she whimpered in her sleep. The pediatrician had said to call if the fever went above 104, or if Lily showed signs of distress, and Victoria watched the thermometer like it was a stock ticker, her hand hovering over her phone. She'd never been responsible for another human life before, not like this. In business, if she made a mistake, she could course correct, could throw money or time or resources at the problem until it was solved. But Lily was small and sick and depending on her, and there was no strategy that could fix this, no negotiation that could make the fever break faster. All Victoria could do was sit there in the dim glow of a nightlight shaped like a moon, stroking Lily's hair and murmuring words she didn't remember learning. At 3:30, Lily woke up crying. "I want my mommy," she sobbed, and Victoria's heart cracked clean through. "I want my mommy, and she's not here, and she's never coming back." Victoria had no training for this, no framework, no template. She pulled Lily into her lap, feeling the child's hot skin through thin pajamas, and said the only true thing she could think of. "I know. I'm so sorry. I know you miss her." Lily cried harder, her small body shaking, and Victoria held her and rocked her and let her own tears fall into the child's dark hair. They sat like that until the fever finally broke at dawn, until Lily fell asleep again with her head on Victoria's shoulder, until Marcus called from his hotel room and Victoria's voice cracked when she said everything was okay now. When Marcus got home that evening, he found Victoria asleep on the couch with Lily curled against her side, both of them exhausted. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching, and when Victoria's eyes opened, she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for taking care of her, for being here." "I didn't do anything special," Victoria said, carefully extracting herself from under Lily's weight. "I just stayed." "That's everything," Marcus said. "That's the whole thing. Just showing up and staying, even when it's hard." Over dinner that night, takeout because nobody had energy to cook, Marcus told Victoria about the pitch. He'd won the contract, a 2-year partnership worth close to $3 million, but he'd almost blown it in the final meeting. The investors had asked about his expansion plans, his growth trajectory, his vision for scaling, and Marcus had told them the truth. He wasn't interested in getting big fast. He wanted to grow sustainably, to build a company where people could have careers and lives, where nobody had to choose between being successful and being present for their families. "They said I was thinking too small," Marcus said, twisting pasta around his fork. "That I'd never compete with the big players if I didn't prioritize growth." "What did you say?" Victoria asked. "I said I'd rather compete with myself. That the only metric that matters is whether my team goes home at the end of the day feeling like their work meant something and they didn't miss the important moments with the people they love." He smiled slightly. "Then I showed them our retention numbers. We haven't lost a single employee in 2 years. Our competitors have 60% turnover. They signed the contract." Victoria sat back, something clicking into place. "You're not less ambitious than me. You're just ambitious about different things." "Maybe," Marcus said. "Or maybe I learned the hard way what happens when you get the balance wrong." He glanced at the living room, where Lily was watching a movie, then back at Victoria. "My wife, Sarah, she died 3 years ago. Aneurysm. No warning, no chance to say goodbye. She was here one day and gone the next, and I realized I'd spent the last 5 years of her life working 80-hour weeks and missing everything. Missing her." His voice went rough. "I can't get those years back, but I can make sure I don't miss Lily's childhood the same way, and I can build a company that doesn't require anyone else to make that mistake." Victoria felt something shift in her chest, a tectonic movement of understanding. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't know." "Why would you?" Marcus said. "You and we were competitors. I was just another obstacle to overcome." He met her eyes. "But you're different now. These past 3 weeks, watching you with Lily, seeing how you're trying, you're not the same person who walked through that door in designer heels and thought she could optimize a 7-year-old's morning routine." "I don't know who I am anymore," Victoria admitted, and it was the most honest thing she'd said in years. "Maybe that's progress," Marcus said gently. Week 5 brought its own crisis, but this time it wasn't Lily who broke down. It was Victoria. Her CFO called at midnight, his voice tight with panic. The board had called an emergency meeting. They wanted to replace her as CEO. Her absence over the past month had created a power vacuum, and her second-in-command had been making moves, whispering to board members that Victoria was distracted, that she'd lost focus, that the company needed leadership that was actually present. They were voting in 48 hours, and if she didn't show up to defend herself, she'd lose everything she'd spent 15 years building. Victoria sat in the guest room, with the phone clutched in her shaking hand, staring at the wall. She could leave. The bet was just a bet, not a legal obligation she couldn't break. She could go back to Manhattan, walk into that boardroom in her armor and her heels, and fight for her company. She could win. She was good at winning. But it would mean abandoning Marcus and Lily with 3 weeks still left on their agreement. It would mean proving that when it came down to it, she was exactly who everyone thought she was, someone who chose empire over everything else. She thought about Lily, asking if she knew how to braid hair, about the drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands, about the night the fever broke and Lily had whispered, "You're nice. I'm glad Daddy lost the bet." She thought about Marcus's team and their circle time meetings, about the way they actually listened to each other, about how they'd slowly started including her in their jokes and their struggles. She thought about dinner at 6 and bedtime at 7:30, and the rhythm of a life that wasn't measured in quarterly earnings. Then she thought about her penthouse, silent and cold, about the photograph hidden in her desk drawer, about her mother's voice explaining that some people just loved their work more than they loved people, and the way 9-year-old Victoria had decided right then that she'd never let anyone matter that much, because mattering led to losing, and losing led to pain. She was crying when Marcus knocked on the door. "I heard the phone," he said quietly, sitting on the edge of the bed without waiting for permission. "What's wrong?" Victoria told him everything. The board meeting, the vote, the choice she had to make. "I can leave," she said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand like Lily did. "The contract has an emergency exit clause. I'd owe you financially, but I could go back and save the company." "Okay," Marcus said. "That's it? Just okay?" Victoria stared at him. "Don't you want to tell me I should stay? Don't you want to use this as proof that I've learned something?" "What I want," Marcus said carefully, "is for you to make the choice that you can live with. Not the choice I'd make, not the choice that proves anything to anyone. The choice that's true for you." He reached over and took her hand, his palm warm and steady. "But I'll tell you this, that company will survive without you. Maybe it'll even thrive. You're brilliant, Victoria, but you're not the only brilliant person in the world. Your team will figure it out. Your board will find a new CEO. The business will continue." He paused. "But Lily has gotten used to having you here. She talks about you at dinner, shows you her homework, saves funny stories from school to tell you. And if you leave now, she'll learn the same lesson you learned when you were 9, that work matters more than people. I don't want that for her." "That's not fair," Victoria whispered. "No," Marcus agreed. "But it's true." Victoria didn't sleep that night. She sat in the dark guest room and thought about legacy, about what she wanted to leave behind when she was gone. Not a company with her name on it, she realized. Not quarterly earnings or market share or a reputation for ruthless efficiency. She wanted to be someone's drawing on the fridge. She wanted to be the person who showed up and stayed, even when it was hard. She wanted to be someone who loved people more than she loved work. At 6 in the morning, she walked into the kitchen where Marcus was making coffee. "I'm staying," she said. "I'm calling the board in an hour, and I'm resigning. They can find a new CEO, and I'll help with the transition remotely, but I'm staying for the full 60 days. And then," she stopped, the words catching in her throat. "And then, maybe I don't go back at all." Marcus turned from the coffee maker, his eyes searching her face. "You don't mean that." "I do," Victoria said, and the certainty in her voice surprised her. "I've spent 15 years building something I'm not even sure I want anymore, and these past 5 weeks, I've been happier than I can remember. I like eating dinner at 6. I like helping with homework. I like your team meetings where everyone actually cares about each other. I like—" She gestured helplessly at the kitchen, at the drawings on the fridge, at the life that had felt so foreign and now felt like home. "I like this. All of it. And I don't want to go back to my penthouse and spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd stayed." Lily appeared in the doorway, still in her cat pajamas, her hair a mess of tangles. "Are you guys being mushy?" she asked, wrinkling her nose. "Daddy, can Victoria do my hair today? I want the braids we looked up on the computer." "I still don't know how to braid," Victoria said, but she was smiling. "But we can figure it out together." "Okay," Lily said happily, and climbed into Victoria's lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. Over her head, Victoria met Marcus's eyes, and something passed between them that didn't need words. It was acknowledgement, maybe, or permission, or just the quiet recognition that they'd both been guarding something broken for too long, and maybe it was time to let it heal. The final 3 weeks passed in a blur of ordinary moments that felt extraordinary. Victoria learned to French braid by watching tutorial videos at 2 in the morning, and Lily wore the results to school with pride, even though they were lopsided and slightly lumpy. She joined Marcus's team for their Friday afternoon game sessions. Apparently, competitive Pictionary was part of their culture, and discovered she was terrible at drawing, but excellent at trash talk. She negotiated a major partnership deal for Reid Technologies from her laptop in the living room, while simultaneously helping Lily with a diorama about the solar system, and the multitasking felt less like chaos and more like a kind of rhythm she was learning to dance to. Her own company transitioned more smoothly than she'd expected. Her COO stepped up, the board approved the change, and Victoria found herself consulting instead of controlling, advising instead of commanding. It was different. It was uncomfortable. It was also freeing in a way she hadn't anticipated. She still worked, still strategized, still closed deals. But at 6 o'clock, she closed her laptop and helped set the table, and that boundary felt sacred in a way that made her understand what she'd been missing all along. On day 57, Marcus's mother came for dinner. She was tiny and sharp-eyed, with gray hair and Marcus's same steady way of watching people, and Victoria could feel herself being evaluated from the moment she walked through the door. They ate meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Victoria had made both from scratch, a small miracle she was absurdly proud of, and talked about school and work and the weather, all the safe topics people use when they're circling around what they really want to say. After dinner, while Marcus was putting Lily to bed, his mother helped Victoria with the dishes. "He's happier," she said without preamble, passing a plate to be dried. "I haven't seen him this happy since before Sarah died. Lily, too. She talks about you constantly. Apparently, you're very good at voices when you read stories." "I'm really not," Victoria said, feeling her face heat. "I just try." "That's all anyone can do," his mother said. "Just try and show up and care." She was quiet for a moment, her hand still in the soapy water. "Sarah was my daughter-in-law for 8 years, and I loved her dearly. But she's gone, and Marcus is still here, and he deserves to be happy. So does Lily. So do you." She turned to look at Victoria directly. "Whatever this is between you three, whatever it's becoming, don't run from it because you're scared. Fear makes us do stupid things. Trust me." "I know." Victoria swallowed hard. "What if I mess it up? What if I don't know how to be what they need?" "Then you learn," his mother said simply. "Same as you learn to make meatloaf. Same as you learn to braid hair. You try and you fail, and you try again, and eventually you figure it out. That's how love works. That's how life works." On the morning of day 60, Victoria woke up before her alarm and lay in the guest room bed, listening to the sounds of the house waking around her. Marcus's shower running, Lily's feet padding down the hall to brush her teeth, the coffee maker beeping in the kitchen. 2 months ago, these sounds would have driven her crazy. The lack of control, the unpredictability, the way family life refused to be optimized or scheduled or contained. Now they felt like music, like the soundtrack to a life she'd been missing without knowing it. The bet was over. She could leave today, go back to Manhattan, reclaim whatever version of her old life was still available. Or she could stay and figure out what came next without a contract or a timeline or a clear endgame. Just stay because she wanted to, because somewhere in the chaos of burnt pancakes and sick nights and homework battles, this had stopped being an obligation and started being home. Victoria got dressed in jeans and one of Marcus's old hoodies that she'd borrowed 3 weeks ago and never returned. She went downstairs and made breakfast. Pancakes that were actually edible, bacon that wasn't burnt, orange juice poured into 3 glasses. When Marcus walked into the kitchen, he stopped in the doorway and just looked at her, his expression soft and complicated. "Day 60, he said. "Day 60, Victoria agreed. "The bet's over." "Yeah." He poured coffee, handed her a mug, and leaned against the counter. "So what happens now?" Lily thundered down the stairs before Victoria could answer, already talking about her field trip and whether Victoria could come as a chaperone. Marcus caught Victoria's eye over the child's head, and the question was still there, hanging in the air between them. Victoria thought about contracts and deals and clearly defined terms. Then she thought about the drawing on the fridge, about the way Lily had fallen asleep on her shoulder last night during movie time, about how Marcus's laugh lines appeared when he was really amused instead of just being polite. "I don't know," Victoria said honestly, and it was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. "But I'd like to find out, if that's okay with you." "It's more than okay," Marcus said quietly. They didn't talk about it more that day. There was breakfast to eat and backpacks to pack and a field trip permission slip that needed signing. Victoria drove Lily to school while Marcus took an early meeting, and she sat in the pickup line with all the other parents, her black sedan looking less out of place now that it was covered in a fine layer of suburban dust. She thought about the board meeting she wasn't attending, the deals she wasn't closing, the empire she'd walked away from. She thought about the life she'd built brick by brutal brick, and how it had been impressive but hollow, like those luxury apartments that were beautiful and empty. This life was different. It was messy and unpredictable and full of small moments that mattered more than quarterly earnings. It was Lily's lopsided braids and Marcus's terrible jokes and family dinners where everyone actually talked to each other. It was circle time meetings and bedtime stories and learning that love wasn't a weakness. It was the only thing that actually mattered. That night, after Lily was asleep, Victoria and Marcus sat on the back porch with glasses of wine and watched the stars come out over the quiet suburban street. "I called my real estate agent today," Victoria said. "I'm selling the penthouse." Marcus turned to look at her, his expression careful. "That's a big decision." "I know," Victoria said, "but I don't want to go back there. I don't want to be that person anymore. The ice queen in her fortress, so afraid of needing anyone that she built walls out of success and achievement." She paused, gathering her courage. "I want to be here, with you and Lily, if you'll have me." "Victoria," Marcus said slowly, "you don't have to make this decision right now. The bet's over. You could take time, figure out what you actually want instead of just reacting to—" "I know what I want," Victoria interrupted. "I've spent 2 months learning what I want. I want breakfast at 6 and dinner at the same table every night. I want to help with homework and argue about bedtime and learn how to be part of something bigger than just myself. I want—" She stopped, emotion thick in her throat. "I want this. I want you, both of you, if I'm not too late." Marcus set down his wine glass very carefully. "You're not too late," he said. "But I need you to understand what you're signing up for. This isn't another bet or another contract. This is real life, and it's hard. And there are going to be days when Lily is impossible, and work is stressful, and you remember how much easier everything was when you only had to take care of yourself." "I know," Victoria said, "and I'm not expecting it to be perfect. I'm not expecting it to be easy. I'm ready to try, to build something that lasts, with you." They sat in silence for a long moment, the night air cool around them, the house warm at their backs. Then Marcus reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Okay," he said simply. "Let's try." 6 months later, Victoria stood in what used to be the guest room and surveyed the changes. The generic beige walls were now painted a soft gray blue. Her clothes hung in the closet next to Marcus's. Her books were mixed in with his on the shelves. The room had stopped being a temporary space and become home, the same way this life had stopped being an experiment and become real. Downstairs, she could hear Marcus and Lily arguing about homework, their voices rising and falling in a familiar rhythm. She'd learned to distinguish between real arguments and the kind of bickering that was just how they communicated affection. This was the affection kind. She smiled and went down to join them, and Lily immediately appealed to her. "Victoria, tell Daddy that I don't need to practice spelling. I already know all the words." "Lily, tell Victoria that's exactly what you said last week before you spelled because with a Z," Marcus said, but he was grinning. Victoria sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd eaten her first burnt pancakes, where they'd had countless dinners, where she'd slowly become part of this family. "How about this?" she said. "You practice spelling for 20 minutes, and then we'll all play that new board game Grandma brought over." Lily considered this. "Can we have ice cream too?" "Don't push your luck," Marcus said, but he was already getting up to check the freezer. That night, after Lily was asleep and Marcus was finishing up a client call, Victoria sat in the living room and looked at the gallery of photos on the wall. The old ones were still there. Marcus and Sarah and baby Lily. Moments from a life that was over, but not forgotten. But there were new ones now, too. Victoria and Lily at the park. The 3 of them at Lily's school play. A candid shot from Thanksgiving, where everyone was laughing at something that probably wasn't even that funny, but the joy was real. Marcus found her there when his call ended, standing in front of the photos with her arms crossed. "You okay?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "I was just thinking," Victoria said slowly, "about how 6 months ago I thought family was a system you could optimize, a problem you could solve with the right strategy and enough planning. And now," she gestured at the photos, at the life they represented. "Now I understand that it's not about optimization at all. It's about showing up. It's about staying even when it's hard. It's about loving people more than you love being in control." "For someone who claims not to be good at this," Marcus said gently, "you've gotten pretty wise." "I had good teachers," Victoria said, leaning into him. His arm came around her shoulders, steady and warm, and she felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the quiet recognition that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The next morning started the same way every morning started now. Alarm at 5:45, coffee brewing, the sounds of a house waking up to another day. But when Lily came downstairs for breakfast, she was carrying a piece of paper, her expression serious. "I made something at school," she said, putting it on the table in front of Victoria. "We had to draw our family." Victoria looked down at the drawing. It showed 3 figures again, taller this time, more detailed, Lily's artistic skills improving with age. But the labels were different now. Daddy. Me. Mom. The last word was written in careful letters, and it was pointing to Victoria. "Is that okay?" Lily asked anxiously. "I know you're not my real mom, but Miss Peterson said family is the people who take care of you and love you, and you do those things. So I thought—" She trailed off, suddenly uncertain. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She reached out and pulled Lily into a hug, holding her tight. "It's more than okay," she said, her voice rough. "It's perfect." Over Lily's head, she met Marcus's eyes, and what she saw there made everything else fall away. All the doubts, all the fears, all the wondering if she'd made the right choice. This was the right choice. This messy, complicated, beautiful life was exactly what she'd been running from for 32 years, and exactly what she'd needed all along. "All right," Marcus said, his voice suspiciously thick. "Who wants pancakes?" "Me," Lily said, pulling away from Victoria and climbing into her chair. "And can Victoria make them? Hers are better than yours now, Daddy." "Wow," Marcus said, clutching his chest dramatically. "Betrayed by my own daughter." They laughed, and Victoria got up to start breakfast, and the morning continued its familiar rhythm. But everything was different now. Everything had changed. The Ice Queen had melted, and what remained wasn't weakness or vulnerability or any of the things Victoria had been afraid of all those years. What remained was something stronger, a woman who'd learned that real success wasn't measured in quarterly earnings or empire building, but in moments like this, in family dinners and bedtime stories and drawings that said Mom in wobbly letters. She'd lost a bet and had to live with a single dad, and what happened next changed everything. Changed her. Changed her definition of success, of happiness, of what it meant to build a life worth living. She'd thought she was sacrificing her empire. Instead, she'd gained a kingdom. A small one, maybe, measured in pancakes and homework and goodnight kisses. But it was hers, and it was real, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.